what's up? It's BigJackFilms here, and welcome back to the InuYasha vlogs. Well, guys, ever since 2020, when we started the series, I've been really looking forward to talking about this particular episode. It's a two-parter, but it is a special episode, much more than the woman who fell in love with Sesshomaru arc. This is the arc known as the Tragic Love Song of Destiny. And first and foremost, I should say, this is my all-time favorite episode of the entire run. Not just InuYasha, not just the final act, not just the movies, not just Yashahime. This is peak InuYasha. This is peak writing. Peak storytelling, peak explanation, peak exposition, peak acting, peak animation. It is one of the most gorgeous episodes I have ever seen of television. And I'm here to explain why. And it is so good. I am coughing a little bit. But we're going to get into it. So, what is this episode? Why the title? Why is it the best? Well, if you have stuck around the show for this long, the show that has lasted for 6 seasons so far. Yes, we've got 3 to 4 more seasons and 1 more movie to go through. That includes Yashahime. But why this one? Well, to simply put it, if you have been sticking around for the show thus far for the last 100 and something episodes, this two-parter finally gives us the full explanation of how InuYasha and Kikyo met 50 years ago, the return of the sacred jewel, how it got into Kikyo's possession, how the Bone Eater's Well came to effect, how Mr. Centipede came to effect from the first episode, how everything started. Now, when I was starting the vlogs, I was even considering starting with this one. But I felt, you know what? People could probably start with the first episode. But if they want the abridged, here's what the show's core is all about, they can stick around for this two-parter. But I would recommend people, if you're going to start with the show, you're going to have to start with the first episode. But this one is for people who really earned it, who really stuck around for it, got engaged in the characters, got engaged in the plot. And it's almost like a thank you to the fans, I feel, that Toho and Takahashi and company really set foot with this episode. But with all that out of the way, what's it about? Well, we actually start off with Kaede as a child who comes across her sister Kikyo, who is in a battle with some demons, and she's surprisingly teamed up with Tsubaki, who you might remember from the 3rd season, the Dark Priestess, before she kind of became evil, even though she was sort of a dark apprentice, essentially. And they are both incredibly powerful fighters. Meanwhile, we get to InuYasha. This is before he's sealed by the tree, this is before he has the beads of subjugation, and he's being chased by a couple typical demons, and he's realizing he's a little wounded, and he's like, I gotta get stronger. I gotta find a way to get higher up in the ranks. So that happens on his end. Meanwhile, we get to, actually, Sango's village, and this is when I believe her grandfather was running things, and Kilala, of course, is there, which is a really cool bit of extra detail. And they see that the cave of Midoriko, who you remember from the 1st or 2nd season, is glowing. So they go in to check it, and they come across Mr. Centipede, who's like, you know, screaming and shrieking and trying to get into the cave. Sango's grandfather uses Chaotic to cut her in half, and they realize she had the jewel, and without the jewel, she constantly can be rejuvenated. So they realize, okay, this jewel's impure. We have to find a priestess. So that leads to Kikyo being handed the sacred jewel in her possession. Now, something I should point out very quickly, before we go any further with the plot, is that for those who don't know, I have been writing in my BigJackFilms reviews that my character has a relationship with Kikyo. Now, you're probably wondering, why is that? Why is that happening when you've got multiple other people you're dealing with, Jack? Well, it actually stems all the way back from a fan fiction I wrote eons ago, like almost 10 years ago. That was my original continuation of the series post Final Act, which was called InuYasha The Next Chapter, because in between the original series run and the final act plus Yashahime, all we had to go on to keep up the story was fanfiction stories. So I threw in my 2 cents that added a lot of expanded material to the mythos, to the backstories of certain characters like Toga and Kagra and Kikyo. Now, in my backstory, in my sort of prequel anthology trilogy, one of the stories is that my character, as he's traveled through the multi-universes and has become a hardened warrior, actually ends up meeting Kikyo a year before she obtains the Sacred Jewel while she's still a priestess in training. And he was already in tune with sacred powers, so he trains her. And essentially, they fall in love, but then he has to go leave. And he does not come back for a very, very long time. And in that year is when this takes place, the tragic love song of destiny. In that story, as we continue, I just want to bring you a little bit of notes there, for those who do watch my channel. Meanwhile, Kikyo has the jewel and is still slaying demons, and she's shooting in the middle of the rain at a demon, and actually almost bumps into InuYasha, who's actually, it's the night of the new moon, because he's human. Now, as he's trying to get to shelter before it gets, like, tonight's the night, basically, he smells blood, and that's Kikyo's blood, and they have their first kind of interaction, which is really tense. Kikyo's looking, like, really intimidating, just saying, stay the fuck away from me, while InuYasha's like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about with the sacred jewel shit. But then Kikyo collapses, InuYasha goes down to her, and it's like, yeah, she's pretty. But then, obviously, the villagers come in, and he takes off, and they find her. And Kikyo's kind of like, okay, I'm grateful he didn't kill me. But then, while Mr. Centipede's going around finding the sacred jewel, that's how InuYasha gets the idea of like, oh, the sacred jewel can increase the power of the demons. Okay, I'll use it to become a full-fledged, because I'm sick of this because of my fucking brother. So, then he goes to encounter Kikyo the next morning. And it's a pretty cool standoff, and while he's like pretty much saying, okay, you know what, bitch, hand it over, I'm going after you, Kikyo just fires a bunch of arrows at him, and you know, he's completely unexpecting how good she is with a bow. Thank my character. But, basically, Kikyo's like, you know, oh, you're a half-demon. Okay. So I'm gonna leave you here, and, you're gonna fuck off, and you're not gonna do this again. And InuYasha's like, I'm gonna keep coming back and getting that fucking jewel. I can smell the blood on you, right? And that's the thing, it almost becomes sort of immediately this bitter rivalry where he's like, give me the jewel. No. Give me the jewel. No. It's like a Wile E. Coyote skit. And so, what happens is that over time, then the next scene, what's really cool about this episode is that it doesn't try too much to reanimate flashbacks that we've seen before. They do try to incorporate stuff that they had animated from, like, the first season. So, like, for example, there's a scene where, obviously, InuYasha says, you know, the smell of blood of you stinks, and Kikyo doesn't realize that because, like, they don't know about bathing in that period. So, she goes to the waterfall and she dunks water on her and, you know, kind of, like, washes herself down. And I love the fact that, in a way, the visuals show that, like, the outfit, the kimono, kind of attaches itself to her skin. So you kind of see the skin glisten with the outfit. It's a really beautiful shot, and InuYasha sees that. So there's obviously an attraction with these two. But then the next day, InuYasha comes in and says, Kikyo, give me the fucking jewel. And that's where we have our first real acquaintance, you know, introduction with each other, where Kikyo, like, aims her arrow, and this is where, like, of course, Karawanda's music comes in, and she's like, why didn't you kill me that night? And InuYasha's like, I don't play dirty. I'm not like the other demons. And then she asks, well, what's your name?
It's InuYasha.
InuYasha, you say. I'll remember that.
And literally, like, InuYasha charges saying, you know, he's literally like an Inigo Montoya where he's like, prepare to die! And Kikyo just pins him to the trees again. And it's literally that flashback segment from the Return of the Tragic Priestess Kikyo, from the Resurrection of Kikyo arc back in Season 1, where we see the whole flashback. And she's about ready to kill him, and then kind of dials it back, and InuYasha's like, will you stop it? Stop! Why don't you kill me? And she's like, just stop coming after this jewel. And what's cool is they actually established that Kaede was there during that interaction, which is really cool. There's a lot of Kaede sort of narrating the story, which I think is a really cool callback, because again, we don't see Kaede much in this season. So, while that's going on, we also have to deal with Naraku. But at this point, he's not created yet. It's still Onigumo, the bandit. But we'll get to him in a sec. But we have this red spider that has been kind of going around the lands with his demons, a couple of, like, small demons, but Kikyo and InuYasha have been dealing with them, and it's annoying this spider who's like, I hate these two, I'm gonna get rid of them. And it's literally a miniaturized version of the spider form that Naraku takes in the second movie, which I think is a nice nod to continuity, that this is sort of the core of Naraku's essence, that he started as a spider. Hindsight, if anybody traveled back in time to that time period, the best thing to do is you see that demon spider, you should have just been... And the entire problem of the show would have been avoided if somebody just stepped on that spider. The whole world would have been saved if that was the case, but no. So, basically, we actually, yes, we do see that, Kikyo is taking care of Onigumo. Surprisingly enough, they don't show the flashbacks from when, from Kikyo's lonely journey, where we see, like, the bandit that dealt with Onigumo, and then that whole ordeal that did add to the story, which I guess because they had to cut it for time, it would have been cool to see. I would love to see somebody do an extended cut of this that adds a bit more that was cut from this two-parter. But we do see her and Kaede taking care of Onigumo, and Onigumo's looking at Kaede like, oh, you know, Kikyo's kind of hot, and Kaede's like, shut up. And then she goes to, like, her sister and everything. While that's going on, we also do see the remainder of the Tsubaki arc where, you know, apparently Tsubaki had been sending some demons out after Kikyo, despite the fact that, you know, what happened was prior is that Tsubaki had told Kikyo, do not let yourself fall in love, it'll curse you for eternity, literally like Eartha Kitt and Hollow, so it's like, you will be cursed for eternity. But it's not like that at all, but we get that whole thing that transpires where Kikyo places a curse on Tsubaki and makes her eye all fucked up. Now, what's cool is it's almost like implied that Kikyo and Tsubaki went to the same master to train. Now, you could argue that if you're going to include bridging my show into this, is that my character came a year prior, and that's why Kikyo was much more of a protege, because she had prior experience, where Tsubaki came in a little late, and so there's that rivalry. And she wanted to take care of the Sacred Jewel, but she was too pure and full of malice to take care of it. So, of course, we get it where the spider does possess Onigumo, and thus Naraku is born. But before we get to Naraku just completely fucking shit up, this is another element that I really like that I have incorporated into my show, if you have watched my series. There is a moment where winter hits, and essentially, Kikyo has been assigned by another country to take care of a demon.
I've been asked to slay a demon from another country.
So they have to go across the land, essentially to the western continents, to take care of this. And it's in the middle of the snowstorm, and they take care of this beast demon pretty easily. Now, if you watch my review of the first movie, which is a scripted character review, there is a post-credit scene that has a flashback that shows my version of my character out in the snow with a couple of knights investigating something, and there's a demon. We established in my show that in this episode, when you see that other country, that my character had actually hired Kikyo to come in and take this demon out, but I was supposed to meet with her. Little did I know that she left, like, right after. She didn't take the money, she didn't take anything else, she just left. And that's where you have that scene where I find the sacred arrow that belonged to her. So we do try to bridge that gap in between, which is really cool. So if you watch this episode, you see an expansion of that.
Right on target.
But back to Naraku finally being created. Now, he doesn't have the jewel, he doesn't have the shard, so he's not as powerful yet as he would be 50 years later. But he does play a part in the story more than we expected. He is fully formed with his bamboo figure, and he starts an attack on the village, which is the attack that causes Kaede to have her eye removed, which is another nice nod to continuity, because that is something nobody asked, like, how the fuck did she lose her eye? So that was cool to see that as well, that she had her eye damaged in the battle, and so that's why she's got that for the rest of the series. But, of course, Kikyo feels really bad for her sister and InuYasha and them. They've taken out all the demons. But during that sunset, InuYasha meets up with Kikyo and says, you know, hey, I'm sorry about your sister. And Kikyo's just like, I'm sick of fighting InuYasha. Do you want to just, like, use the Sacred Jewel to make yourself human so we can just go live normal lives? And that's that scene that you see in the first episode. Or, like, the first season, where that is where you realize, oh my god, these two loved each other. And what I love about this two-parter, it does expand that. It does show that they did care for each other. You have that wonderful, beautiful scene from the first season of them going downriver, and they land at port, and Kikyo trips and lands in InuYasha's arms, and they make out right then and there, and that's fantastic. That's fucking earned. Way more than the second movie. And it's a really great union. You actually see them, like, walking home at night.
So you can become a normal human too. And be my...
Enough. Stop. That's all I need to hear.
Kikyo, I truly am in...
The only thing I will say that they don't include is another flashback segment you see in season 1 where Kikyo says, you know, bring it to you here to this very place. So there is a couple things that they had to kind of skip over. And then Naraku's like, oh hell no, I'm gonna let that happen. And thus we see the beginning of the treachery of the deceiver, where he disguises himself as InuYasha and actually tricks Kikyo the night before, where he says, can we do it early in the morning? That's why they never met up with each other, because they diverted the time, because Naraku switched the time on Kikyo. So Kikyo goes to meet InuYasha early in the morning in the field, and that's when Naraku cuts her down. It was a diversion. And unfortunately, Naraku does not take the jewels there and there. He should have. I think that was his biggest mistake. He did not take the sacred jewel then and there. He instead put it back on the shrine where it's protected, and then goes after InuYasha to disguise himself as Kikyo and trick him into that she betrayed him. Now that scene was prominent in early seasons as a flashback, and here they completely reanimate it, completely re-dialogue it, but it works. It works in its favor. That was more of an abridged one. Sure, it's more beautifully animated in the first season, where it's more inclined with the traditional animation, whereas this one's more digital, but they did do a good job recreating that sequence. Which leads to, of course, InuYasha stealing the jewel, and Kikyo coming in, pinning him to the tree, and here we are today. Now, this is, again, where the biggest flub Naraku had was he should have taken the sacred jewel shard after leaving Kikyo, because InuYasha would have been dead regardless. But what happens is that because Kikyo asked for the sacred jewel to be burned with her body, the sacred jewel became non-existent. So Naraku shot himself in the foot, that he realized, shit, I had a plan and it went backwards. Kikyo, you fucking bitch. And so that's probably why he's had such a grudge against her for 50 years. So, thus, we have the story where we're at. But it's not over yet. We actually see the final scene is Kaede, pretty much maybe a day before the events of the show starts, looking at InuYasha pinned to the tree for 50 years. Then we cut to 500 years in the present time, and we see the birth of Kagome, which, again, is really nice. Like, that's a really nice scene. Now, she was 15 when the show started, which was in 2000, which means that she was born in 1985. Which makes me realize she was born the year, the central time, one of the central timelines of Back to the Future.
It could mean that that point in time inherently contains some sort of cosmic significance, almost as if it were the temporal junction point of the entire space-time continuum.
No wonder Doc was able to create the DeLorean time machine in that, specifically in 1985. It was a fucking parallel presence, I guess, which is amazing.
On the other hand, it could just be an amazing coincidence.
So, yeah, Kagome in the anime is born in 1985. I mean, the manga started in 97, which means she was born in, like, in 1984 or something. But I don't care. I think it's cool that she was born in 1985. I think that's really awesome. But in this case, yeah, we see the birth of Kagome, and the jewel has been in her when she was born, which was cool. And then we actually end the episode where we started, where Kagome's off to school, and then sees the Bone Eaters well, and the adventure begins. I mean it when I say it that I love this episode. I have watched this one probably more than any others. It is so detailed, so well written, so well, like, put together and assembled. And you could tell Takahashi wrote all of this ahead of time before she even wrote the first page. Which, kudos to her. That is a very tough job to do. And it is just beautiful. Beautifully animated. Beautifully acted. Both from the Japanese and the English actors. This is easily Willow Johnson's best performance as Kikyo. I love every second of it. She's absolutely spectacular. Richard Ian Cox is really giving his all in this. Everybody involved is doing a spectacular job. I love this episode so goddamn much. I wanted to give an in-depth review of this for a very long time. Talk about it for the last, we're on year 3. Year 3 of the InuYasha vlogs, and God, I've been waiting to look forward to talk about this one. I overall love this episode. Best episode of the show. This one you can count on being my number 1 if I ever do a top 10 list. Absolutely gorgeous. So this is a 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10 if possible. This is the best of the best the show can offer. I know next time we're going to be looking into a few things as the story continues, but man, it just felt good to talk about this episode again. There is so much world building. There is so much to tell. There is so much mystery solved. A lot of cases are closed on this one, and now it allows us to really move forward with the story and see where it ends. This was sort of a clear sign, I think, for a lot of people that, oh yeah, the show's ending soon, which is sort of bittersweet in a way. But check this episode out, The Tragic Love Song of Destiny, my all-time favorite InuYasha episode. But of course, this is a good time to ask, what are your thoughts on this episode? And what actually is your favorite episode of the show? Let me know in the comment section below. This could be original series, final act, and Yashahime. Let's include them all. Go ahead and say it in the comments below. But of course, don't forget to support our Patreon. Just $1 more will get you early access to all of our content, as well as other special features. I had a really good time talking about this episode, and we're going to be rolling on with Season 6 down the line. So thank you so much for watching, and until the next video, like, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys later. This is BigJackFilms signing off saying, I got no lesson at the end of this, just go watch The Tragic Love Song of Destiny. It's essentially the Lost movie, and for me, it's my favorite episode. So until next time, on the InuYasha vlogs, take it easy.